I'd like to welcome the latest Careers in FM Spotlight interview, this time really focused on spotlighting careers for ex-veterans and how they've got into the FM sector. So welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Hi.
So I'd love to hear about your transition into FM, Richard. You're in the Navy a long time. Was it 19 or 17 years?
17 years, yeah.
17 years. So how did you make that transition? How did that come about?
So I suppose you've got to start with anybody leaving the armed forces. It's a very strange kind of thing that you find. You when you're in the armed forces for such a long time, you get institutionalized, and there's this it's not done on purpose, but there's this whole thing about you will never succeed in Civvy Street, you will never do better than you do in the armed forces, and that's a common story you hear from lots and lots of people. So me being no different, coming out into the big scary world, having to actually work for a living for a change. What do I do next? Where do I go? How are my skills transferable into Civvy Street? And you know what? It's a question that every service leaver asks themselves, and there is no answer. And I've got a lot of friends who have made the transition like in the last couple of years, and I've tried to help and guide them. But it's so buried deep into your psyche when you spend so long in the military that even if you've got other people that you know and trust who've been there and done it, you still don't believe them. You still, what am I going to do? So my transition, I'll be honest, where I've ended up is more out of luck than judgment. However, with the right guidance for others, you know, I hope that they pick up from my experience and they can make a more informed decision. I left the Navy. I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do, and effectively, so being on the ship, I was a marine engineer. So I was a chief marine engineer. You're trained in everything from fixing toilets to working on jet engines to, you know, fixing a door frame to working on hydraulics. You know, you do have a big, broad brush of skill sets. So facilities management is the perfect sort of industry to go into. Of course, you don't understand that because you haven't been exposed to it. So I went through a recruiter and had a very, very proactive and helpful recruiter from PRS Recruitment, who kind of specialise in people leaving the forces and going into sort of more technical roles. And she set up many interviews for like engineering management roles and things like that. And I think in about probably the space of about 2 weeks, I'd been to probably about 4 or 5 interviews for those types of roles. And this one role came up. She phoned me about was about a project manager. And I sort of sat there and thought, what do I know about project management? I haven't got a clue what project management really is. Unbeknown to me, I've been doing it most of my military career, just not the full thing, but probably about 80-85% of the actual thing I've been doing. And I remember not so much arguing, let's call it debating on the phone with her, sort of saying, no, that's not for me. That's not what I want to do. No, I'm an engineer. Let's stick to engineering. So after about 20 minutes, like the penny kind of dropped with me and sort of thought, you know, she's done me proud up to this point. She's given me about 4 or 5 interviews to this date. I want to keep her on side. I'll go to the interview. I don't really have anything to lose by doing it. I'll just do it, get out of the way. We can move on and focus on the engineering management stuff that I really want to do, or the only thing that I know what to do. So I remember going up to Waterloo for my interview for a company called Bouygues, big FM outfit. And I remember sitting down with the then head of projects, a guy called Sharam Safari, asking me lots of questions, and sort of sat there sort of backing them off. Have you ever led a team? Well, yeah, how many examples do you want? And all these kind of things were coming out, and I found the interview easy. However, it was only 25 minutes long. And I remember sitting in the waiting room beforehand, and there were lots of other people dressed in suits with their little briefcases, and me thinking, no chance, you know, there's lots of professionals here. They all look the part, so therefore they, you know, you've got that doubt in your mind. Anyway, did the interview, 25 minutes. I thought, that's that. Clearly not long enough to be a successful interview. got on the train and went home. And literally that evening, the recruiter phoned me up, said, right, I've got some opportunities for you, some offers that have come through. I mean, some offers, that's amazing. And of the 4 or 5 other interviews I've been for, they've been offered 4 of those roles. And then she also said this role that I'd been to that afternoon for a project manager, they wanted to offer me the job. And I sort of sat there and thought, all right, I don't know how, 25 minutes, that's okay. So then she started going through what the offers were, and project management actually offered me the best salary. And I kind of remember a Richard Branson sort of quote saying, you know, don't give up a great opportunity, you know, learn it, do it, and then learn it. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do that. So I took the role, and you know what, I never looked back from there. I went to work for Bouygues, met some fantastic people, and I think a large part of the reason that I've got the success I have today is because of those people. You know, it was that I wouldn't say so much nurturing, sounds a bit immature, but that guidance, that mentorship of those particular people helped me to become the person I am today. And it's not so much them being friendly and pointing me in the right direction, it's showing me how to do the job properly, showing me the processes, and doing it properly and getting me embedded in that. And do you know what, for someone coming out of the military, you are process driven. It's rammed into your head from day one. You must follow these processes, you must do things properly, you know. And so you go into a job like that, and great, you feel comfortable. I don't feel like a fish out of water anymore, you know. And I spent 3.5 really good years with Bouygues Energy and Services, and I just got on with the whole setup of that business, and it kind of reminded me of being in the military a little bit. You know, the way, you know, the chief exec David Carr, he goes about and gets involved with things. You know, you could be sat on your little project site doing your little project, and then that afternoon David Carr will come and sit down next to you, and he'll have his laptop out working next to you. You know, there's no them and us. There's no I am important kind of mentality, and I like that, because the military does have that to a degree, but it's very much a team ethos. You know, all one sort of team. And Bouygues, probably again more luck than anything else, that gave me that fix that I was used to. So it helped my transition. And I think that's really important for people coming out of the military. It's not just finding a career, it's finding what you're comfortable with, what you're used to. And I think for a lot of recruiters and sort of employers out there, they don't understand what goes on inside a veteran's head when they're leaving the services. So I think that's a really important message to sort of get across to people, that it's not just, you know, all these people have got so many transferable skills, you know, leadership, technical ability, drive, you know, work ethos, passion, but they need a little bit of an arm around them just to sort of help them make that transition. And like I say, Bouygues gave me that opportunity. So you know, and since then, I've worked for sort of a couple of corporate businesses. I've worked for some small businesses. I've experienced the highs and the lows. I've worked for a company called George Birchall Services. Unfortunately, they went into administration. So I've sort of been on the receiving end of being made redundant. You know, I've been on the receiving end of being promoted. And again, you know, I've got to the position where I have now just through good and bad experiences. And it's something that now I like to sort of share with other people. I like to give back. And I do have a lot of people sort of leaving the services. They reach out to me on LinkedIn in particular. It's such a fantastic platform. And ask questions. And I'm more than happy to sort of give them that guidance, because it wasn't necessarily that I didn't necessarily have that when I left with LinkedIn. But you see it more and more now. A lot of people being, you know, champions of people leaving the forces and so on. So yeah, that's been my journey. There's been a lot of long hours. There's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears with it. But I think I'm a firm believer you get out of what you put in. And I'd say that to anyone. And that's just not for people who leave the services. But you know, I've found. So I'm not in the FM world anymore. I'm in the energy performance world. But it's certainly an industry I wouldn't take a second thought about going back into if I wanted to go back in that direction.
So just picking up on a couple of things you said there, Richard, and you've definitely preempted some of my other questions around skills and things like that we'll come on to. But you know, a big part for you in that transition was obviously you know that imposter syndrome. You were thinking in the beginning, you know, why would I go for this project management job? What do I know? And obviously, you know, we definitely saw something in you. And what do you think? So skill, yeah, you've touched on some of those. But what sort of things do you think someone can do to prepare themselves for that transition in terms of communicating their skills and the types of things that they have been doing that may be transferable into that next move into a new sector?
Do you know what, that's a really good question, because I think there's two sides to that. I think there's the transition piece from the individual making the move, and I think there's also the company that are not taking the chance. I think that's probably the wrong thing to say, but you kind of get my idea on that person coming into their business. And I think there has to be a happy medium. I think for the individual leaving the service, get some advice for them from those who have already left, you know, but in particular people who have left your specialization in the military. So if you were a mechanical engineer, speak to someone who used to be a mechanical engineer, see what they're doing now, and if they're in the FM world, more importantly, how are they getting on with it? Why are they enjoying it? What are they doing? What makes it so good for them? What makes them feel settled? And just sort of asking those questions. And not only that, so what's the best thing that I can sort of see? How can my skills be transferable? And for a service leaver, it's all the skills that you take for granted. It's your people skills, it's your managerial skills, it's your problem solving skills, it's your get up and go, it's knowing how to do things when you're asked, because that's a big thing that I've found since leaving the military. It isn't such a widely shared characteristic of people, and these things you can't necessarily teach it. It takes years to ingrain that into someone's character. So employers love that. You know, they love someone who does what they're told and does it well and will work hard to make sure it's done. And if you can add other things into that, like management skills, people skills, especially in the FM industry, it's all about people. You know, you work with people, you don't work for companies. And that's what it's about. Business is created through relationships. The relationship is so important. And you know, people leaving the military, they have that. They know how to deal with people. You look at the army, you know, they go into these horrendous places like Afghanistan, you know, and they're having to befriend local villagers who are absolutely petrified, not just of them, but of what might happen to them if they deal with them. And they've learned these skills on how to break down those barriers. You know, it's those skills that people don't realise when you come into Civvy Street, especially in the FM world. It's child's play for them. You know, they've had it at the worst. So this is easy for them, but they don't know that, because you can't know what you don't know. So that's the person. But from a company's perspective, I would say do your research, understand the people that you're recruiting. They are not, you know, this packaged up product that you can just hit the ground running with. They need a little bit of fine tuning. They need a little bit of guidance. You know, I'm a big advocate for people leaving the forces, but I do get a little bit frustrated sometimes with the whole superhuman message that's always sort of plastered. You know, military people are great, this, that, and the other, because straight away you kind of feel like someone's painting a target on your back, or you're getting people's backs up and things like that, and then you kind of straight away, you know, you're not on a level playing field with your civilian counterpart. Your expectations of you is up here in comparison to your, and that's unfair for someone leaving the military. So I think employers need to have do their research and have a good understanding of what they're getting, you know, when someone comes out of the services.
That's a really good point, and you know, a good message. What about the sort of variety and the diversity of the career that you've seen be available across FM? Because I think, you know, part of the problem for FM as a sector is, do people know that that's an opportunity in the first place, and how do they get involved?
Yeah, do you know what? I'm going to speak about it from the Royal Navy perspective. That's what I lived and breathed, and I don't think there's a single job in the Navy that isn't transferable into the world of FM. If I think about the chefs on board, that's going into soft services. If I think of the stewards on board ship, that's going into soft services. If I think of the air engineers, marine engineers, that's going into hard FM. Every single job in the military that I grew up with has transferable skills into the military, and every single one of them, there is overlap with those skills. Yes, they have their specializations. Some are marine engineers, some might handle weapons, but they all have the managerial skills. They all have the problem solving skills. They all have that drive to get the job done. So the work ethos is there across the board. So there is there is a consistency with what you get from the military, and then you've just got the specialization that sits behind that as well. Yeah. So I did answer the question.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, thank you. So project-wise, whilst you're in the FM sector, what things did you find most enjoyable and impactful, if you like?
So working for Bouygues, and again, it goes hand in hand with finding your purpose in life, because when you're in the military, you feel like you have a purpose in life, if that makes sense. When you come out, you kind of lose your purpose a little bit. I went to work in hospitals in particular, in West London, and straight away you feel like you've got a purpose again, because you're delivering something that has an impact on others, and that was fantastic for me. That tickled my interest bone straight away. And I remember I took over from a chap who was leaving the business, so probably not the most motivated individual, but he'd been on one of these sites for a number of years, and I joined with this drive and wanting to prove myself and get my teeth into something new. And I actually found at the end of the year, I got pulled to one side and said, "You've managed to quadruple our turnover, Richard, on projects." Have I? Okay. And for me, I wasn't doing anything I thought superhuman. I was just putting my head down, getting on with it, knocking out the work. Don't get me wrong, the military ethos thing, you don't do set hours. It's not a thing in the military. Well, it might be for some branches, but for the most of us, it's not a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 4. It's you do the job till it's done, and then you go home. And I think that's one of the things that people coming out of the military need to learn to change and get that work-life balance, because the military don't have a work-life balance. Work-life balance that's not even a phrase. It doesn't exist. So trying to make that transition is interesting. But for project management, it was doing projects in hospitals that I knew would do other people good. And I used to get an immense amount of satisfaction out of a finished project, one that during the design phase that I had input into, because people started to take my thoughts and ideas, and then you start to see that turn into actual things being developed on site. And then this project would be finishing, think, yeah, that was my idea. Great, great sense of achievement, fantastic. And then obviously, because my background in marine engineering, I then have an input on the engineering side of things as well. That bit to my company is an added bonus, because I wasn't employed for my technical knowledge. I was employed for my managerial and problem solving skills. So now they're getting a Brucey bonus. And I think this is the other thing that you get from people coming out of the military. So I almost become a one-stop shop from a technical perspective and a managerial perspective. And actually, whereas before they might have to employ 2 different people to do those roles, I'm like, I'll do it. That's fine. Crack on, because you're being helpful, and it's about being a team player. So, yeah, I think I spent most of my time at a hospital called West Middlesex University Hospital, which is near Twickenham, and 3.5 years I was based there. That was my base camp. I did other hospitals, North Mid, Central Mid, the one down in Guildford, is it Royal Surrey? But I did most of my projects at West Mid, and I don't think there's a part of that hospital I haven't knocked down, rebuilt, painted, put something on the roof. You know, I did a lot of projects there. So yeah, that for me, from a project perspective, that gave me my satisfaction. And even now, you know, I love engineering. I miss the hands-on stuff from when I was in the Navy, tinkering with things, fixing things. I do miss that. So I do enjoy it when there's a project that I can actually help with, not interfere, although some others might say different, not interfere with, or try not to interfere with, but to try and help and guide from experience. You know, I've done crikey thousands of projects now in my time out in the military. So I'd like to think I've got some kind of experience and know-how that I can offer others. So obviously, being in the energy performance world now, I'm actually doing a project at the minute down at Salisbury Hospital. We're doing an energy performance project. So all that experience I've gained from FM is now transferable again into another industry. So and the chain keeps going. So
it's very linked as well, isn't it? I mean, you know, energy and performance, but it's kind of part of the overall FM sector. That you're working very closely on everything to do with net zero and, you know, that side of things. So what advice would you have for you know, any service leavers or people that are now stepping into the FM sector and trying to develop their career further?
I think, again, go back, do some research. You know, if you're leaving the service, you get plenty of time to work on this. It's not like you're given a month's notice. You have to give 12 months notice, which I think sounds like an eternity for a lot of people, but it comes around quick. Use your resettlement wisely. Do your resettlement courses, not based on what your mates say, but based on the career that you want to go into. Again, it all goes back to your research. If you want to go into FM, look at like what managerial qualifications you can get. Depending on what level you leave from in the military, you may already have those qualifications. You know, I got Institute of Management qualifications from the Navy from because I left as a chief petty officer. So I've got some qualifications already, which they mean nothing to you in the military, because qualifications, what do you need them for in the military? When you leave, it's important that how you can relate what you've done into civvy speak, because the people on the other side of the desk will want to understand, well, what level's that. Yeah, so do your research and try and get some of your courses that relate to what you're going into, because that's going to become the foundations of your career going forward. Also understand what level you're worth when you come out. One of the biggest things I see people come out and doing is they'll go onto a very low rung of the management ladder. And the thing that I see time and time again is, once you come out and you step on that ladder, if you think, oh no, actually, my mate's a director of that company or whatever, I could do that easy. I've got the same skills. We served together. We did all the same courses. You can't now leapfrog from where you are up to where they are. Industry doesn't see you that way. So when you come out, make sure that you pick the level that is related to what your skills are worth. Because it's a very hard transition, or a very long transition, to try and catch up. So that is really, really important. Because again, you're only as good as your last job. And if your last job was a maintenance manager, as a maintenance engineer at a site, you can't jump up and become the head of maintenance straight away. So yeah, I see that a lot, which that frustrates me a little bit, to be honest, because you see people that are capable of so much more, but they make that error. Well, not an error, that's unfair. They're not given the right advice on where to come out, and then they kind of get not stuck, but then they takes them longer to get up the chain. And if people are as good as you say they are, or we think they are, then they will eventually rise to the top. But it just takes them a little bit longer, and it's a bit more of a painful journey. So that's one thing. The other one is, you know, if and I say to anyone in the military, if you were stuck on an exercise and you were in a burning building and you had casualties everywhere, and we've all done these exercises, you just you snap into auto. You just get on with it. You know what you got to do. You've got the confidence in your training, in your own self-belief. You just crack on, deal with the casualties, deal with the fire, deal with the building that's falling down, deal with the flood, the unexploded ordnance in the corner of the compartment, whatever it is. When you come out into Siri Street, you're not confident in you and have any belief in yourself. And then you sit in an interview, and I've just said it earlier on, no chance. Look, he's dressed the part. Yeah. Mate, seriously, last month you were doing a battle damage exercise, you know, in a completely dark compartment, smoke everywhere. You know, you had a flood in one corner, a fire in the other. There were people with legs blown off in the middle of the compartment. You know, if you can do all that, coming out into the FM world, you can deal with anything. You just got to have belief that, you know, and have the confidence in your own abilities. But again, that only comes from understanding what your abilities are and how they relate into civvy speak, if that makes sense. So,
yeah. And did you have advice at the outset from a number of different people or organisations, or that you found useful to tap into at that point?
Not really. I had some old Navy buddies, if that makes sense, who helped steer me, and one of the reasons I ended up taking the job at Bouygues, other than it have been offering the most amount of money, was that one of my old shipmates worked for the same company, and he couldn't sell it more highly enough. So I remember having a cup of tea with him, or a beer, and he just taught me through it, the process, what it was like. And he did a very different job to me in Bouygues as what I would end up doing. But he just sold the opportunities and the kind of people that, you know, they were up against, or the people they were finding, and it just wasn't what they were looking for, and that I would potentially bring a different dynamic to it. And it was interesting because when I joined Bouygues, you know, the Bouygues Engine Services, even though they're a massive company now, when I joined them back in, crikey, was it 2014, there was only 8 of us in the projects team. You know, 3.5 years later, there were 42 of us. I hate to think how big that projects team is now, but, you know, and again, I've helped grow something, you know. So, and I remember when I joined, they weren't really looking at military people, but after they got me, they proactively started to recruit more military people, in particular ex-Navy engineers, because they were basing it on the experience they had with me. So I'd like to think it was positive. And again, those people coming out of the military, they came straight out of the military into Bouygues, and now they've gone off and done bigger and better things with their lives as project managers. So yeah, it's been really good for them. It's been good for the company. So yeah, you can see the benefits.
Yeah, well, that's positive to hear, and obviously there's a huge network of, you know, ex-military now in FM, and hopefully that is growing, and with the IWFM Veterans Network, you know, long may that continue. So that's been really useful and really interesting, Richard, to hear about your transition and your experience in FM, and how you've got to where you are today. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking to me.
You're welcome. Thank you.